Welcome to episode 4, the final episode for this series. Today, we're talking about how to fix your past immigration mistakes with the most powerful weapon, which is your I-601 waiver. So come on in, joining me from YouTube and Facebook. I'm attorney Ivy. I'm here in Charlotte, and I'm your host. I'm super excited for today because there's a lot to talk about when it comes to waivers. So those of you who are married to citizens, permanent residents, you're interested in getting your green card, maybe you already applied and you're right now facing some challenges, this live is for you. So come on in. I think the group is glitching right now, so I'm going to just take them off. Just go ahead and share the link for YouTube or maybe just Facebook to the group and then they can join. All right, so I'm just going to take that out. Let me know if you can hear me and see me, and let me know where you're watching from. Hello, thank you for joining on YouTube. Laura, welcome in. I am in Charlotte, but I help clients nationwide. So let me know where you're watching from. I get to meet people from all over the USA doing this. So it's pretty exciting today. Happy Friday. You can check out some of my other resources in the comments, wherever you're watching from. I have my team right now helping me. Thank you very much, team. They're ready to answer your questions if you have any. But during this live, we're actually going to go through a series of questions relating to fixing past mistakes. Because, somehow, we're humans. No one's perfect. You might end up in a situation whereby you had to perhaps withhold some information, right? Let's not say lying, right? Because that's what it is. If you don't tell the truth in the application, is misrepresentation. So maybe sometimes you felt the need to withhold information, right? You felt the need to embellish a little bit just so you could get a visa. That could come back to haunt you. It could come back to affect your green card later. So today we're going to talk about how to fix those mistakes, right? Because no one is perfect. I'm not here to judge. I'm here to give you the facts, tell you how you can actually get your green card regardless of those mistakes. All right. So come on in. All right. Welcome in, John. John is excited for today. I am too, because this is a very sensitive subject that people just don't like talking about. And I want to remind you all before we get into the material that your past does not disqualify you if it's addressed properly. All right, your past does not define you, and it does not always disqualify you. So you don't need to hide in shame if for whatever reason you had some misrepresentation. That's very common, right? Or you overstayed. That's also very common. So you're not alone. That's why we're here in this live. I'm doing this every Friday. Today is our final episode for this series, but every Friday you can come here to get some information that would help you improve your green card application process. All right. So we're talking about green card inadmissibilities, basically how to waive that, right? How to fix your past mistakes. Because if you make those mistakes, you'll become inadmissible. That means your green card, there's something in your record that blocks you from getting a green card. All right. I'm going to break down all the different ways you can potentially get waivers as we go along in this live. So make sure you invite your friends, those people who you think may need to hear about this. Because if something is blocking your green card approval, maybe you've been waiting for years and you know something on the record is blocking, and that's usually a tactic because they tell you they're doing some investigation, but it's usually because there's some inadmissibility there, right? You need to figure out how to fix that. All right, because otherwise, access denied to a green card forever. You're done. Okay, so if you don't waive it, your access is going to be denied And, we're going to talk about some scenarios where you're actually cooked, right? Because I get into these consultations with people, and this is where legal expertise comes in, because we have to think outside the box here, because you clearly, were not married, right, when you were applying, but you selected married. You have to get to the bottom of why you did that, or why you pretended you didn't have a child, when this whole time you had a child in the US. Things like that happen quite often. So we're going to talk about that. But some of the honest situations that I've experienced is people getting arrested while their green card is pending. Very common, more common than I would imagine, because if you are going through immigration process, you're not yet a US citizen, right? So, you should avoid at all costs any situation that could land you in, in prison or arrested, right? So if you get arrested while your green card is pending, you're basically canceled. You're basically inadmissible. Because, it's going to depend on the type of crime, right? But this is going to put a dent in your history, because until that arrest is resolved, until there's a dismissal in court, you're going to have delays, denials, maybe get a notice of intent to deny. Okay? So let's talk about another situation where people just kind of violate their status, right? And this certainly comes back to haunt them. Those of you who came on a student visa, that's how you enter the US, and then maybe you weren't able to go to school because, finances. That's very common, right? People drop out after the first semester. But on a student visa, the requirement is that you're going to school. It's not a visa for you to get married under, but people end up, meeting someone in college, and then the person maybe promises to file for you, and you're like, you know what? I'm not going to go to school anymore. You're basically done, because again, you are violating the purpose of your visa, and they could just deny you straight up. Okay, that's why we're going to break down waivers today, because many immigrants, for one reason or the other, have violated their immigration status, right? By overstaying, by working. Sometimes you don't even realize you're violating, especially the working part. And, you drop out of school, maybe you're sick. I've seen situations whereby, people fall sick, but usually it's finances, right? So that happens quite often. All right, but let's look at this one, the lie. That's the one I mentioned to begin this live. The white lie, right? Claiming to be married on a visa, or there's another one that I know happened for a real case where this man basically excluded his daughter's information because she was a U.S. citizen. He didn't want them to, deny his green card. So it was a white lie. He wasn't really lying about anything. He just didn't include the fact that he had that U.S. citizen child, right? So, but 21 years later, when it was time for the child to file his green card, that came up, right? It's like, you never claimed this child before, so, why now? So the white lie, you're cooked. And that was the title of this live today on YouTube. Because basically, if you don't qualify for a waiver, you're cooked. Like that man I just told you about, since it was a petition with his child, he ended up having to be deported. He had a voluntary departure because he did not have any options to actually waive. So yeah, that white lie, that small, tiny yes or no, just pray that you didn't provide fraudulent documents, right? Except, of course, you fall under these humanitarian waiver options that we'll talk about as well. Because sometimes, people have to, they're smuggled, right? Or they have to do different things because their abuser said they should. And so if that was the reason, then, that's a whole different story. But we'll get into that. But anyways, the white lie becomes very important when you're applying for a green card in the future. So let's talk about some common reasons why people are typically found inadmissible. Why would you even need a waiver? Well, welcome in, everyone. I see lots of people joining in, I think from Facebook. Nawal, thank you. All is well. Thank you for joining. Feel free to share with your friends. Like I said, this I-601 topic is very important, and lots of people don't really talk about it because they're still scared to admit that they have done something on their application, their past history. They're still trying to hide it. And you can't really hide it, okay, because USCIS can see everything about you when it comes to your backgrounds for immigration benefits. All right, they do deep investigations into who you are. They ask you about your parents. They ask you about a lot of things. They get your medicals, right? So if you've had criminal convictions or any fraud or misrepresentation on past visa applications, right, any deportation, things like that, false claim to citizenship. Ooh, that's a hard one, because if you've had those types of things on your record, you could be found inadmissible immediately, right? So you certainly want to be aware of your history before you even start filing. Right? Because if you don't know these things, you just get blindsided at your interviews, and some people get picked up at their interviews because of these inadmissibilities that they weren't aware about. The one about health-related grounds, that's a little different. We'll talk about that one. Most people are aware about that one, so they tend to prepare ahead of time. And I had I've had several clients actually, when I was preparing for this, I realized I've actually prepared quite a number of medical-related waivers. Yeah. So that was actually pretty cool. And yeah, so if you're inadmissible for something like that, that's a whole different roadmap that you need. But even though, yes, you're cooked technically because of the lie, you could have a roadmap to forgiveness. And this really depends on the type of violation. Like I mentioned earlier, false claims to citizenship, is one of the tougher ones to waive. But, it just all depends, right? So you're going to have to beg. You're going to have to grovel. Please, please, please. If you can sing, that would be a plus, because you certainly need to say a lot of things to change their minds to actually forgive you and give you a green card after you have violated your immigration status, or just other violations. Like criminal violations aren't quite a violation of your immigration status, but they just need for you to be a good citizen for you to qualify, right? So you have to choose, depending on the type of violation, you have to choose your relief, choose your weapon of choice that you're going to fight. How are you going to fight this? Because you certainly have to fight. Like I said, you have to beg and cry and show rehabilitation, especially if it's criminal related. All right. Some criminal stuff, they're not even going to forgive. Like if it's domestic violence. I had a potential client. I don't think we ended up working on her case, but she came to me after a denial because her husband, it was like an Adam Walsh, basically restriction on the application, right? So there was no waiver for that. This was on the side of the U.S. citizen anyway, but still, some violations just make it impossible for you to get your green card through a marriage. So for that woman, she really needs a different option to get her green card because, she's blocked. Okay. All right. So choosing your weapon, the form that you're going to use, will depend. If you have unlawful presence only on your record, meaning you have a 3 or 10-year ban because you entered without a visa, right? And you've been here for, you basically enter without a visa. That's basically unlawful presence. You're just not meant to be here. You're going to file an I-601A to waive that type of inadmissibility, right? If it's any other type of, inadmissibility, like I mentioned earlier, let's go back a few. If it's fraud or misrepresentation, if it's criminal convictions, prior deportations, that one's a little bit more complex. Not quite an I-601, but it's still a waiver, a hardship waiver of some sort, right? If it's any of those types of, basic or regular inadmissibilities, none of them is regular. They're all a violation, right? But just the general inadmissibilities that you would see, you can just use an I-601 as your weapon to waive that. But if you qualify for a VAWA self-petition or a T visa, these are humanitarian options right now. Those options could actually provide a special advantage for you to still waive these inadmissibilities. It's really actually a cool thing that is in place because of national interest and to protect victims of abuse and trafficking. So if you've been a victim of abuse and the reason why you were found inadmissible, the reason why you were engaged in any type of fraud, especially marriage fraud, is because you were basically abused and trafficked or manipulated into those types of situations, you could potentially get a waiver and still get your green card. So like I said in the beginning, your past does not define you. There's always an option out there that you just need to get evaluated so you can understand what is even available for you. If you have these different forms right here, you may not really know which one applies to your case, because if you file the wrong form, that's also a problem. Where it's going to cost you time and money, because these forms also have expenses to them, except for the humanitarian options, right? Because like I said, that's for national interest to help victims of abuse and trafficking. So keep in mind that if you are qualified for a VAWA self-petition, all right, the hardship you're going to show is really going to be hardship for yourself rather than your relative, because at this point where you've qualified for VAWA, you've lived in this country, you probably even came here because of that spouse, right? You wouldn't need to show hardship for your spouse. So VAWA is very special. T visa also very powerful, to waive all sorts of inadmissibilities, whatever it may be, including unlawful presence, just literally everything. So make sure you're getting evaluated. Don't write off your situation because you don't really understand what your options are. Okay, so we're going to get into the definition of a waiver. And once we start discussing this, I'll get into some questions as well, because I received lots of questions on the Facebook group. I hope they were able to join to actually see this. And I think someone on Facebook right now, Nawal, okay, you have a question. I'll get to that in a minute, okay? But yeah, I'm gonna just basically answer the questions while we're going through the material, because when I looked through the questions and just saw what we're actually talking about today, it's all just gonna make sense, because once you see this information, you'll immediately understand what you need to do, right, for your own self, especially if you're married to a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident. Okay. So, what is a waiver? A waiver is simply asking the USCIS, asking immigration to forgive those violations, right? By using the I-601 that I showed you, those weapons, that will be the forms. You're going to then provide additional evidence, right, that allows them to essentially forgive those, criminal, what is a criminal violation or misrepresentation, right? So you need to, so the question is, what is required if you're going to apply for a waiver? If you're going to apply for I-601 or I-601A, depending on the violation, what is required? Right? Most waivers do require proof of extreme hardship, right? Proof that if you get deported, your U.S. citizen spouse will suffer. That's the main thing, right? So if it's an I-601 or I-601A, you're still going to need to have evidence of extreme hardship, all right? And the secret is really knowing the different pillars of hardship and how to really show that, that the consequence or whatever you're going to feel is just not separation, right? Because most people just say, oh, I'm going to miss him, or we're going to be separated. We're not, they don't really have any substance because they don't understand the 5 pillars of extreme hardship. So if you're watching this live right now, you can take a screenshot of the 5 pillars that you need to provide evidence showing that, there's some chronic medical conditions, right? So not just some health conditions, because it has to be extreme again. So if you're on disability, if you have some cancer, I've had clients who are taking a chemo, right? Obviously, you don't want your relatives to have health issues, right? But this is the reality of what you need for an extreme hardship. If it's financial, you need to show the inability to pay bills, right, without their income. And just even the country conditions, because that's a big one too, for safety and for your career. Like, are you going to be able to find the same jobs in that country, right? So there's a lot of stuff that you need to show, not just that we're going to be separated, I'm going to miss him, and something vague like that. That's not extreme enough to show. But just keep in mind that if you have a lot of these issues combined, right? Let's just say there's no chronic medical condition per se, right? But there's some financial issues and also education, right? Or career, right? You combine those with country conditions, you could potentially get into extreme hardship. So you still need to get evaluated to understand how these pillars can apply to your case, right? So if you don't have a chronic health condition, still talk to an attorney to understand. Maybe even just going to your physicals, you could talk about how you maintain each other's health, what you do as a family together. Again, little evidence together can form one extreme hardship. Okay? Okay? So, Nawal, let's see your question here. Well, actually, was that really a question? Maybe you just made a comment. Thank you for watching. Let's see what you said. You've been waiting for 3 years. Oh, for his I-485 approval. Is your husband currently in the U.S.? Okay, he has his 5-year work permit. Yeah, so now that there's some visa restrictions, it will certainly cause, longer wait times for sure. But yeah, the good thing, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I always tell my clients, if you have your work permit, just be thankful for that and just continue living your life. Because at the end of the day, life is what's happening right now. And if you focus on what you don't have, you're going to just be unhappy forever, because we can't control the timeline. The politics, maybe we can control, but right now, not so much, right? Especially as an immigrant, you can't really even vote. So you just need to kind of go with the flow and be thankful for the little things that you have. If you're with your family in the U.S., great. I talked to a client the other day. She had to go all the way to Dubai, or was it Dubai? I forgot the country. They had to meet in a third country anyway, because her husband's home country wasn't safe enough for her to go there. But it's just not convenient with children and all of that. So yes, thank you, Nawal, for sharing and for joining this live. I haven't seen you in one of our lives before, but I'm attorney Ify, if you're wondering, and I help clients with family-based immigration. So if you and your husband need any help as you go along, I'll be happy to help. Feel free to reach out, send me a DM or something. Okay? But for right now, yeah, he can just work. He's an athlete. It's great. So he can just work. You can live your life, build your family, and that's what counts, right? Okay. Thank you, Nawal, for that little insight. So I'm going to go back to our slides here talking about the 5 pillars of extreme hardship. But the main thing I want you all to focus on is making sure that you evaluate every possible outlet for you to get a waiver before you decide to go back to your home country. For I-601A specifically, you can actually wait in the US for all of these waivers to get approved, because once you file them, even though your I-45 may be denied, or maybe you got an NOID or something of that nature, you can still potentially wait in the US. So don't make any harsh decisions if you get a denial and you have a violation or an inadmissibility on your record. Don't just freak out. That's all I want you all to remember right now, because people that I talk to on my calls, all I'm doing is really putting out fires, because people are just freaking out, all the time, by just watching random TikTok videos about random people that don't even relate to your situation, right? So not every situation can be waived with the I-601 or I-601A. Certain offenses, like a false claim, could potentially be waived with a T. Those circumstances have to be very specific, but false claim is really a permanent bar from getting a green card. Like, that's just it. You're done. You're cooked. Right? So this is why you need evaluation for your specific case. Let's find out if you've been a victim of trafficking, or if you just need an alternative. Because if you're done, you're done. I told you about a man that we actually filed the voluntary departure. So being done is not the worst thing in the world. It just means the immigration journey is done. That's what that means. Okay. So no need to feel fear or feel shame about it, because it already happened. And if you're trying to get your green card, you need to be honest and transparent about it. People that hide their records from their attorneys, I'm like, I don't understand. Like, do you want help or not? Like, what are we doing? Okay. So I'm going to tell you some real case examples here. I-601s that I actually worked on for my clients. I've had some VAWA approvals, but they didn't quite have any inadmissibilities that we had to really focus on, because they also got their I-45 green cards as well, right? So this particular situation was just a misrepresentation on a fiancé visa, right? And so when he entered the U.S. on the visa, got married, applied for the I-45, it got denied. And then obviously he called my office. And it was just like, he was so shocked. It was like, I don't understand. I got approved for the K1. So what's the issue? But it was just something about previous marriages, divorces, things like that. And he failed to mention some previous marriage, right? I don't know if it was like an omission. Like I said, a lot of misrepresentation by omission. Sometimes it could just be maybe because you had an agent, right? Maybe they selected something that you didn't really agree with, but at the end of the day, it's your case. So if it's an omission or an addition or something that was not true, right, you're still going to get denied. But when he came to us, he was married to a citizen, right? She was a doctor, I believe, and they had a child together. Or I believe at that time she was pregnant. Now this child is probably like 3 years old. It's crazy. We're in 2026 now. So there was a whole lot of hardship that was going to happen if he was deported at that time. Right. And so within 8 months, this case got approved. It was great. He's a permanent resident, moved on with his life. So it does happen in real life where people accidentally, there was a white lie, right? On the application, accidentally left something out or accidentally selected something. We'll just call it an accident, right? Because it really could be like just a typo or just something, a glitch in the system, right? Because I know y'all are not liars, right? Yeah, because most of the people I talk to, nobody ever just outrightly, it's either like an agent did it or maybe like the man with his daughter. What was the reason why he left it off? I think he just didn't think it was necessary because she was already a US citizen. That's what he said, at least. But I'm pretty sure he just didn't want them to deny his visitor's visa because he had a citizen relative. But she was a child at the time. That's why you guys need to be talking to lawyers. Because at the time when he was worried about his citizen child, she couldn't even file for him. So that could have been his argument. Like, listen, I'm just going for business. My child is literally 3 years old. Like, what the heck? And these visas are only like 2 years or 10 years. And so, but anyways, this person got approved. Real life story. Congrats to my client. That's not him, but that's a funny GIF that I like to use. Another real case example, and while I was talking to you guys about remembering all the vaccine waivers I did, I remembered yet another one that I forgot before. This was the one I forgot is about a mother. Well, the daughter filed for her, and then she was the one that did the whole thing. And we filed for her mom. We did the I-601. It was just such a miraculous win for that one. I'm very quick too, but I didn't remember it for this session. I'm just going to tell you about this particular client who was going to get a vaccine waiver for her religious beliefs, her religious reasons. I'm not sure exactly what those beliefs are, but it seems to me like she was somewhat like Amish, right? Or lived that type of lifestyle where you just don't really use technology or like just really remote. Right, and that's why she hired us, because she was somewhere in North Carolina, just needed someone to just take over the case, because she's like, I don't do all of that. So we helped her from the beginning with her I-130, I-485, helped her get a work permit, right? I don't believe she even used it to do any work. I think she just needed ID in the US at the time. And we filed the I-601, very clear evidence of the history of not having taken any vaccines. I believe she actually had taken one vaccine maybe as a child. I don't know. I don't remember, but I know I've done a case where they actually had taken one vaccine before, but that did not still disqualify them. So after a long 14 months, because someone did ask how long does it take, that's someone from the Facebook group. I didn't get your name, but yeah, it takes around 8 to 14 months from what we're seeing here, right? So if you are married to a U.S. citizen or permanent resident and you violated your status somehow and you need to file an I-601 waiver, be prepared to wait for at least a year and a half, maybe even 2 years, right, before you get your decision on that. So that's one of the questions. I hope you got your answer. Thank you for participating in the group. Okay, I see another comment that just popped up here. Hello, Kay. Mr. Zeus. If you have questions, feel free to ask them. But these questions here that I have people in the group asked them before, and I just was going to share it in the live because, like I said, I was going to talk about a lot of these things today. And I hope you all are getting some value from all I've been sharing. We still have a little bit more to go with our slides, but one of the questions here, I already answered that during the topic when we're talking about just extreme hardship. Someone here is asking, how do I prove extreme hardship to qualify for an I-601 waiver? Right, so extreme hardship is the number one requirement if you're gonna get that waiver for the violation, right? So you need evidence showing either some health reasons or financial reasons, how you are supporting your spouse or how your spouse is, gonna need your assistance with their medical stuff, right? So you need letters from a doctor. You need just your financial bills, your bills at home, right? Let's go back to that slide, talking about that. If it's going to be about your career or education, you need to show what kind of field you're in, right? What kind of education, right, or schooling that you're pursuing that you're just going to lose access to, or benefits if you're a disabled, on disability. If you're on disability, you can use that as well because you're going to lose access to your health care and all of that. So that's how you prove hardship to qualify for the I-601. You certainly need that qualified relative, though, right? So if you don't have a U.S. citizen spouse or, I believe, parent, right? Because child is not a qualified relative, unfortunately. You will need to qualify in a different way to get that waived. Otherwise, you're done, right? Your immigration journey is done. You might end up deported if you don't qualify for VAWA or a T to get a waiver on that. Okay? Hope that answered the question. Thank you for participating. Someone else says, not that one. Someone says, if I lied on a visa application years ago, can an I-601 waiver fix that now? Short answer is yes, certainly. That's really what it's for. The I-601, the general waiver form, that's your number one weapon to fix any lie on a previous visa application, because that will definitely come back. Okay? Okay, thank you for your question. Let's see what it says here. I haven't seen you in one of my lives before, but I'm glad you're here today. Feel free to hit the follow if you are on Facebook, or subscribe on YouTube so that when we start our series for April, this is the last one for this session, you'll be notified and you can participate and ask your questions ahead of time. Because it's always great to know what you need clarity on so I can create my sessions around that and answer your questions as well. Okay? All right, so Kay has a question here. Kay says, and this question is so big, but that's okay. Recently filed an I-601 waiver based on spouse previous cancer history, and the application was submitted in December. She recently had a cancer reoccurrence. Can we use this to strengthen the waiver? Absolutely, Kay. Absolutely. Yeah, they might ask you for a request for evidence while it's pending, or if you ever get called for an interview, or just at any point in the application, you can always use that evidence, because that just shows it is, it's extreme hardship, like it's clearly ongoing. So certainly. Okay, thanks for asking that question here to help us really get into the type of evidence, right? It's really just about getting those medical records, just getting any type of paper evidence, paper trail. You can show if it's financial stuff, your bank accounts, right? So you can just show to see how it's really going to cause the hardship, either because they're going to lose your income as a beneficiary, right? Because you work and take care of the house. Or it's going to be that emotional support. Again, little situations put together can form extreme hardship. So don't be discouraged if you don't have anything quite extreme, like, a cancer history or something. All right. So we'll get on to our next question. And I believe I still have more to show you all today. But let's get on to the questions. I kind of wanted to throw them in the mix today because we've been on for around 40 minutes now. So I appreciate all of you for still watching, still being here. Thank you. All right. What was the last one I said? How do I prove extreme hardship? Right. So what types of crimes will automatically disqualify me from getting an I-601 waiver? I mentioned that during the live as well, mentioning some specific fraud crimes, right? If it's money laundering, that's very serious, right? False claims to citizenship, right? That's not quite a crime, but I-601 waivers don't quite work for those ones. All right, so be careful on applications. Don't select things that are not true. If you're not sure, just do some investigating before you apply. Any applications maybe for employment that you had in the past, it's common with people on student visas. They would select that they're U.S. citizens just to get that position. That's false claim to citizenship. If it's not tied to any trafficking or abuse, you might be banned from getting a green card forever. So be careful about that. All right. So this question, actually, when I started earlier, I was like, yeah, let's definitely talk about this because I don't know what's going on in the air right now. A lot of my clients are getting picked up for DUIs. And I'm just like, guys, please just take Uber. Okay. In Trump's America, you don't want to play around with getting any type of arrest or criminal charges because a DUI will affect your chances for just anything, right? Even though it doesn't seem like such if there's nothing, if it's just like a few, I don't know how they measure the breath, whatever, like it's not extreme, right? But these days for immigrants, any single thing you do, shoplifting, anything, they're gonna take it seriously. So you can still get a waiver, but it's going to just affect your history in general if you have any criminal convictions, right? But definitely talk to an attorney. Right? My number is on the screen, and I want to talk to you all one-on-one to talk about these scenarios. I'll see how we can help. Okay. Thank you, Zeus and Kay, for your question. You are welcome. You're asking how you can use the new information. Well, you can't use it until you get asked for more evidence, right? So that's why I said just prepare it and have it ready because it will help when you're asked. Because with USCIS applications, except it's something you filed online, of which I-601s are not filed online, you can't just submit random evidence like that. Okay, so just hold on to it because it will help when it's time. Because for the most part, they might ask you for a request for more evidence, and that will be an opportunity. Okay, I hope that clears that up for you, Kay. Dolce, someone else from Facebook. Thanks, guys. Let's have you today. Are you on the Facebook group, or do you just see me randomly on your For You page? Where are you guys watching me from right now? Dolce, cool name. Dolce, you did your fingerprints last month. How long does it take? Okay, 2 years and 6 months married. Have you applied though? So you did your fingerprints, so you've applied. What did you apply for? And when did you apply? Right? Because if you've been waiting for 2 years and 6 months, that's a long time. Well, if you just been married for 2 years and 6 months, that's a whole different thing. All right, so let me know when you applied and we can talk about it some more. Okay, yeah, so we're talking about the real case examples. I told you all 2 specific cases where I filed I-601s and they got approved within a short time, relatively, because with immigration, if your case is really less than 2 years, that's pretty decent, right? Especially a case that has a waiver with it, right? So if you're not sure, what's needed for you, you certainly need to talk to an attorney. If you already got denied, you definitely need to talk to an attorney, because at this point, I mean, what else, right? What else are you going to do? Except you just want to be done, because that, like I said, that's the result of making false claims or committing crimes and all of that. You just be done, and you can just self-deport and just leave. And lots of people are doing that more these days, and I'm not even mad at it, right? But if you want to stay, you have to get serious, right, about what's needed so that you don't face the same situation again. So the risk of guessing is facing denials, delays, and possible removal. If that's what you want, then that's fine. But if you want something else, don't let your past hold you back. You just can't ignore it. You have to actually face it with proper strategy so that you don't end up in the same situation again. All right? You could always file waivers. You could always reopen the case, because sometimes, the case just needs something else to fix it. Okay? So don't hide. Just talk to an attorney. You can reach out to me after this live, and we could find you the best solution for your case. All right? So we've come to the end of our final session for this season. This is episode 4, where we're talking about I-601 waivers. Throughout the month, we covered different topics relating to denied green cards and red flags and how to self-petition, really. And today, I told you all that self-petitions is actually one of the strongest ways that you can also waive an inadmissibility. So even if you're not married to your U.S. citizen spouse, you can still waive an inadmissibility, any misrepresentation, any criminal convictions, things like that. And today, the final one is the I-601 waivers. That's a tough one to talk about, because it's not easy to convince the USCIS, the agents, that this is extreme, right? You have to really, really dig for that evidence. And that's why I said to Kay earlier that, evidence that's happening now, even though you already submitted, just keep saving it, because it's really a tough application to get through. When I had my first 2 medical waiver approvals, that was like such a shock to me, because those are also tough to get through as well. But, we did it, right? We're confident. We follow the rules. We help you make sure that you stay compliant. And so that at the end of the day, you get your status without any issues. And so if you're ready to move forward, you don't want to ignore your past anymore. You want to face the issue and talk to a professional, you can reach out to me. Like I said, my number is on the screen. It's also in the comments too. I believe my calendar link, if you want to book a one-on-one call with me, you can do that with the link in the comments. Okay? Okay. I'll answer the last few questions that I see here. I believe we have 10 more minutes, maybe. Yes, Dane, thank you. We're done. We'll answer. We have maybe just 3 more questions, I think, and then we'll just get through those. And those of you that booked with me, we'll get on that call right after this. All right. So, Zeus, you are from Nigeria. So cool. I'm from Nigeria too. So you said you applied for the waiver in 2025. So it's pretty okay, just like 3 months ago, basically. And I-130 is approved already. Do I know how long it takes for the decision of the waiver? I think you just joined the live, so you didn't see when I talked about the timelines with my real case examples, where I filed the I-601 waiver for misrepresentation, and it was a hardship waiver, extreme hardship. It took 8 months. That client lives in California, though. You live in Maryland. I think it would really depend, right, on where you live, wouldn't it? For the most part, that's how timelines work with immigration, where you live, the type of case, the administration, because this administration, they have several levels of review that's making cases take even longer. So that's also something to consider as well. Right. So I hope that things move fast for you. I'm glad the I-130 is already approved. That's always great. Once the I-130 is approved, even if you're in removal proceedings or whatever, that's usually a good step, in the right direction, because it shows that the marriage is actually legitimate and USCIS agrees, because USCIS is the only one that can approve the I-130, and, they did it. So, yeah, congrats for that. All right, so let's see here. Other questions. I talked about the DUI. And then this one says, what happens if my I-601 waiver gets denied? Do I have any other options? Well, this is tricky because your I-601 is usually your final option, right? But we'll have to evaluate your case to see if you qualify for any other humanitarian option that could be applied in this case to waive that inadmissibility, right? Because otherwise, you'd be facing potential removal if your I-601 gets denied, if the hardship is not extreme, right? But again, like I said, extreme hardship, you just need to be able to provide enough evidence to really show that even little tiny hardships here and there, when you put them together, it forms one big extreme hardship. That is just an inconvenience. I mean, as a U.S. citizen, you have all your U.S. citizen, your family here, so you're not leaving. Okay, so if you basically get denied for that one, we'll talk about other options. Just reach out to me. Let's see how we can help. Right? I did answer this question earlier in the session today. About the differences between an I-601 and I-601A, but just briefly, it really is dependent on the type of inadmissibility that you have. Right? For I-601, it's a general waiver. For I-601A, it's for unlawful presence. That's the major difference. So if, it's not better to file either one. You just have to file the one that is for your case. Okay? So if you don't know, then you certainly need a lawyer before you file, right? If you don't know what type of inadmissibility you have going on. If you've already been denied, they usually tell you in the denial letter. But sometimes you already know because like it's a crime, you got arrested or something, right? And finally, the final question is actually talking about criminal records, because lately, like I said, people have been calling me, getting picked up with DUIs. Maybe there's just an increase. That's one way to look at it. It's not my clients. It's just an increase in policing. So perhaps that's what's causing the rise in DUI arrests. I don't know. It's crazy. But if you get arrested, you don't get convicted, right? You don't get charged with anything. It gets dismissed. That's great. You don't even have to expunge the records, because every record, whether it's expunged or not, USCIS has access to it. So don't even bother, right? Because old records, expunged records will still affect your green card application. You just need to file an I-601 to get a waiver of any of those crimes, if it's one that is for that will get to the level of inadmissibility, because not every single crime will get you to inadmissibility, and not every single crime can be waived. There's just so many rules and nuances around it. This is why it's a conversation we certainly need to have one-on-one, right? let's talk about those white lies that's going around and those arrests, right? And avoid further denials and delays in your case. I wish you all the best today. It is Friday. It is the last Friday of the month. I'm thankful to be here, thankful to be able to do this with you all, thankful for my team. We've been, just working hard over here, just really trying to keep up with this administration. So appreciate you all. Thank you for being here. This season has been great. I'm just very thankful that we've been consistent with it, sharing knowledge with our community and just being here, showing out. So thank you all for your support. I'll see you in the next season. Make sure you subscribe, leave your comments. Let me know if there's anything you want me to talk about, perhaps. Maybe you want to make some suggestions. I would like that. So leave a comment about that. And yeah, we're going to sign off. Cheers. I have my Diet Coke over here. So cheers to the weekend. Wish you all a wonderful rest of the day. All right. Bye-bye.